Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining into this live statewide teletown hall as we talk about the issues facing the Lone Star State. My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm the president of Texans for Fiscal Responsibility and EmpowerTexans.com. Really appreciate you taking part in this call. Our mission as an organization, of course, is to empower Texans, to assist Texans in creating and sustaining a strong system of fiscal stewardship within all levels of government, but especially state and local government, ensuring that the greatest amounts of economic and personal liberty rest with the people. The people are supposed to be in charge. We can only be in charge, though, to the extent that we're informed and engaged as citizens. There are a lot of issues facing the great state of Texas in 2015. We'd love to keep you abreast of those throughout the legislative session and time afterwards. You can visit our website at EmpowerTexans.com, click the subscribe button, and I would love to get you onto our free newsletter. Again, you can go to EmpowerTexans.com, click subscribe, and there you can sign up for our free newsletter. Really appreciate each one of you participating in the call this evening. We also have a good number of folks who are joining us listening online. Throughout the call tonight, we would love to have you engage by asking questions and participating. All you have to do to ask a question, if you're listening on your phone, is press 0 on your home phone keypad, and that will put you in line up at any point during the time tonight to ask a question or offer a comment. If you're listening online, just follow the on-screen instructions, and those will tell you how you can also participate by dialing in toll-free. Again, if you're listening online, just follow those on-screen instructions to ask a question, offer a comment, and if you're listening online on your telephone, just press 0. Really appreciate each one of you taking part tonight as we talk about the issues facing the state. That's important, looking ahead to 2015, talking about those issues that are going to be front and center before our lawmakers so that you and I can be asking the right questions going into November and know how to hold accountable our elected officials once they begin the work of governing. You and I as citizens have an obligation to keep ourselves informed and engaged as much after the day after an election as the day before it. To help us navigate the waters of the issues facing the Lone Star State, I'm real excited to have on with us taxpayer champion, state rep, and now State Senator-elect Van Taylor. Van Taylor is a seventh-generation Texan. He is a family man, a successful businessman, and a decorated Marine. Van Taylor served in the Texas House since 2010. He's an Eagle Scout. I know this will perplex a lot of you, and you find that he's a graduate of Harvard. Doesn't seem like a whole lot of good conservatives have come out of that fine institution in recent years, but here he is. He left Harvard, went into the Marine Corps, honorably served our nation in Iraq, and was not only repeatedly cited for his bravery and received the Navy Commendation Medal with V for Valor. Today he's a businessman. He and his wife reside in Plano with their 3 daughters. Van Taylor, thank you so much for being with us tonight as we chat with folks about the issues that are facing the Lone Star State. If you don't mind, though, maybe just give folks, I kind of ran briefly over your bio, maybe give folks a little bit of the background and why state government is something that folks should be focused on.
Well, Michael, I appreciate that very kind introduction, and I want to thank all you guys at home for taking time to care about our community and our state. And there's no question that different states have done it differently. Texas has gone with a low tax burden state. We've focused on making sure that we're funding key core things. And you look at other states where, like for instance, California, where their gas tax is 60 cents a gallon, our gas tax is 20 cents a gallon, and they're dying under massive transportation load problems, and you know, in Texas we're sort of keeping it even. We're going to try to improve that here, but the bottom line is Texas has been a successful state, and it's been a successful state, and jobs keep coming to the Lone Star State because we have a low tax burden, and having a low tax burden is a direct result of keeping spending under control. And I'm a proud taxpayer champion and work with people like Michael in Austin to make sure that the legislature is fiscally responsible, and so that in turn we can have a successful state.
Now, Mr. Taylor, one of the things you noted there at the beginning, we're a low tax state, and certainly that has been both a something that's been actively pursued, and also sometimes maybe accidentally. California does their dead level best to keep us looking good, which I guess we appreciate. But one of the things you did last legislative session, and when we start talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of the legislative process, something you did last session is on the first or second day of the legislative session, you introduced a rule. Now, most people tune out when they hear legislators talking about legislative rules, but your rule required notation in the caption. If you don't mind, explain this rule and why it's important. It's very illustrative
Sure.
of why we should be paying attention at all levels of the legislative process.
What this rule said, it was very simple. Any bill that increases taxes or fees must say so in the first line of the bill. And that seems very straightforward, very simple. And I think some people might even ask, well, why do you even need that? And the answer is that people were hiding multi-billion-dollar, financial items, 30 pages into the bill, and legislators wouldn't realize what they were voting on. They wouldn't understand it, and as such, that rule change was a crucial change for Texas, and in fact. People from Washington, D.C. have called me, and they've tried to start pushing that as a potential rule change literally for every state in the union. And I'm also proud to say that this has been filed in Washington, D.C. as a federal law. So this kind of transparency, this sort of obvious, this idea of taking something and making it obvious to anybody that would care to look and see is a crucial step, I think, to making sure that Texas remains a place that continues to be fiscally conservative.
Now, folks, we've now had something like 1,500, closer to 2,000. I'm sorry, that's 10,000. Excuse me. I need to read the numbers. I should have my reading glasses on. 10,000 folks on the call with us right now. I really appreciate each one of you taking time out to visit with us. My name's Michael Sullivan with EmpowerTexans.com and Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. I'm on with Van Taylor, State Senator-elect from Collin County, but this is a statewide call, so you don't just have to live in North Texas to participate in the call tonight. If you have a question about the issues facing the Lone Star State, Mr. Taylor and I will do our very best to answer your questions. We're going to start off, though, just down the road from you, Mr. Taylor, and talk to Jeff. Jeff in Dallas, Texas. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us. Well, wait a second, got a little bit of a, okay, I think that we might have a problem. Let's go back to Jeff. Jeff in Dallas, thank you so much for being with us. There we go, get the technology working tonight. Jeff, what's your question?
Hi, good afternoon. My question was concerning the gas tax. I just wanted to know, considering there's been such volatility in gas prices at the pump, I've paid up to 60 cents a gallon, more or less, over the last 2 years. Would you consider a 2-cent increase in the gas tax as a way to help Texas deal with its growing population and infrastructure needs? Thank you.
Sure. Well, the good news is Texas's gas tax, in addition to being low, has been the same for I think since the mid '80s, and there is little appetite in the legislature to increase that tax. I certainly would oppose any effort to increase taxes. We are looking at the Texas Department of Transportation has gone through, and a lot of academics have looked at it and estimated we need to spend about $10.8 billion per year to keep our infrastructure up to snuff. This fiscal year, we should spend about $9.8 billion a year, assuming that Proposition 1 passes, which would be, which is not a tax increase. It's just just moves tax revenue from one place toward transportation, really dedicates it to transportation. and then that in turn means that we're only $1 billion short a year from what we really need to keep our transportation infrastructure up to snuff in Texas. And I'm one of many legislators that think that we need to take a component of the new vehicle sales tax and dedicate that to transportation so that we have enough funding. I mean, the good news is when you look at the census numbers for minutes spent in traffic per capita, in Houston, they've gone from 12 years, they've gone from 47 to 49 minutes. In the DFW area, it's actually been 35 minutes the entire time, the entire 12 years. In California, they've gone from 97 minutes to 117 minutes. So we're certainly, as a state, treading water while you watch every other major state is losing ground very badly and very quickly because they're just not investing in their infrastructure the way Texas is. And I don't like to tread water. I like to move ahead. And so I think that we've got some solutions that I'm excited to support, and it'll be interesting to see how other legislators respond to the challenge of properly funding transportation. But the good news is in Texas we're doing okay. It's other parts of the country are doing horribly, and the amazing part is even with much higher taxes in total, the per capita taxes in California are almost 3 times what the per capita taxes are in Texas, and much higher gas taxes. So it's not really a question of taxes; it's a question of how you use spending wisely. And Texas, I believe, is spent wisely, and I want to see us continue to spend wisely by investing in our critical infrastructure to let Texas continue to grow.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, I would add to Mr. Taylor's answer that just very bluntly, we don't need to increase taxes. The myth out there is let's increase taxes, put more money into the pot. Unfortunately, what we know is that when you increase taxes, it usually ends up reducing revenues available to government. It's a 2,000-year-old theory that has been practically reaffirmed by the famous Laffer curve. But the increasing taxes does not always result in just the magic of more money appearing. We know that this summer, you can visit EmpowerTexans.com and check out the source citations on all this. But this summer, the Texas Department of Transportation's commission, the Oversight Board, voted to spend $350 million of transportation money on streetcar purchases, buying streetcars. Those don't move rail. Those are not the way to get people from point A to point B in an efficient manner. We've got Texas Department of Transportation investing in jetpack research. Texas is a lot more responsible with our dollars than the other states, as Mr. Taylor's correctly noted. That doesn't mean there aren't continued opportunities for efficiency to be found, and we need to be constantly refining our efficiency as we look at future spending, and not just throw more money in and hoping that that gets well spent. Let's go to Tony, also in Dallas. Tony, thank you so much for being with us. Tony, what's your question tonight?
Thank you for hearing me, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
There's been a lot of
talk about foreign entities taking part in the infrastructure here in Texas and using toll roads, especially like the ones that they're trying to push on us here in Dallas, to make money off of Texans. I was wondering if you might have a comment about that.
Well, sure, Tony, and I'm glad you asked that. I joined forces with several other legislators from North Texas opposing an effort to toll US 75, which I thought would be very unfair. I mean, if you look at Collin County, we have 4 major thoroughfares in the county: George Bush Tollway, the North Texas Tollway, and the Sam Rayburn Tollway, and US 75. I am broadly speaking opposed to tollways. And I certainly don't think there's room for any more in my neck of the woods in Collin County, and that's why I want to see more funding for transportation, out of existing tax revenue, so that we do not end up having more tollways. And I was happy to say that that because of the pressure that I and other legislators put on the North Texas Council of Governments and the Texas Department of Transportation, that they held up and stopped their desire to toll the Dallas-Fort Tollway, which a lot of people are pretty happy about, Tony. But those are.
What about the foreign entities? Yeah,
the foreign entities. Sometimes different foreign entities have come in and offered to finance different pieces of tollways. There was an effort, I believe, about a decade ago for a foreign entity wanted to buy the Sam Rayburn Tollway. That ended up being purchased by North Texas Tollway. There are no foreign-owned tollways in at least in my Senate district within Collin County, and I by and large, when the foreign entity says we want to buy it, generally speaking, the legislature moves to make sure that a foreign entity doesn't end up buying it, and so we have been successful in fending those off. Certainly in my time in the legislature. Michael, do you want to comment on that for Tony?
Yeah, look, I think that there is, certainly we always need to take a look at who is going to be participating in these, in these. I use the word scheme not in a negative sense, but in kind of the general economic sense. But when we're looking at new government financing methods, maybe that's a better way to say it than scheme. It is prudent to always ask questions like Tony did about the influence of foreign investors, out-of-state investors. The one thing that does make infrastructure a little bit different is you can't take a road back to some foreign country, and if a foreign entity is investing their dollars in the state of Texas and they do something screwy, thanks to eminent domain, that foreign company can find itself having invested a whole lot of money and no way to recoup it. So I think that that we do have the protection that once asphalt is laid, it really can't be unlaid by those companies. So I think that the risk is on those folks. But it's very prudent to continue asking that question, continue checking to make sure, asking those principled questions of, is this the right thing to do? Speaking of right things to do, let's go to Paris, Texas, where Keith is been patiently waiting. Keith, thanks for being with us tonight.
Yes, I was wondering if he's in favor of zero-based budgeting for state agencies, offices, and bureaucracies.
Sure, Keith. So I'm glad you asked that, Texas. I received a letter last week from Jane Nelson, who's a state senator from Denton County, and is acting as the finance chair in the state Senate, which is a pretty important committee because that's deciding the budget for the state of Texas, which is about $100 billion every year. And she has indicated that she will take several agencies and use zero-based budgeting to determine if that's the right way to go about it. At the end of the day, I'm just for less spending, and I've fought hard again and again to try to move everybody's direction to the right and try to get them to spend less, because I believe the secret to Texas's success as a state is the fact that we have a smaller state government because we have less spending. And I think you'll see Van Taylor out there continuing to fight for less government and less state spending. Zero-based budget can be a way to get to that, and I'm eager to look at that and eager to try that. But at the end of the day, if you've got a bunch of people that just want to spend all the money, I don't care how you do your budgeting structure, they're going to figure out how to spend it. So it's really a question of putting the right people in with the right mindset, and also doing what you just did, Keith, and holding their feet to the fire and saying, I want to see you guys be thoughtful and considerate and spend less.
And Keith, and just for the folks listening who don't know what zero-based budgeting is, zero-based budgeting starts from the presumption that every dollar that's going to be spent has to be examined for effectiveness, for appropriateness. It's a prioritization it's a way to prioritize spending by making every dollar being spent have to be justified before the appropriators. That's in contrast to the way most governments do budgeting now, which is called baseline budgeting, which, this is kind of crass and maybe a little unfair, but it starts from the premise that everything spent in the past was spent okay, and now you just need to justify the increases. How much more are you getting? You're automatically going to get what you got last time. Now you just have to justify it. So that's the kind of the two competing, in very broad, general ways, approaches to budgeting: baseline versus zero-based budgeting. Texas has done baseline budgeting generally, but over the past several years have been a few instances of zero-based budgeting being employed. I think the last time was in 2003 when the state faced about a $10 billion budget shortfall, and zero-based budgeting was employed to make up that gap without a tax increase. Hey, folks, let me remind you that if you've got a question or a comment throughout our time together this evening, you can press 0 on your home phone number. Also, if you're listening online, and we've got a good number of folks who are listening online, all you have to do is follow the dial-in instructions there on your screen, dial the toll-free number, and get into the Q&A queue there. Real excited now to have 20-some thousand folks participating in the call. Real excited to have each one of you on with us tonight. I want to encourage you to visit EmpowerTexans.com. There you can sign up for our newsletter if you click the subscribe button. One benefit of subscribing is you'll find out about the events. We'll be doing these very regularly. Some of these will be done telephone events. Some are going to be online video chats and other things with folks like Senator-elect Taylor. Again, real excited to have each one of you participating on the call tonight. Mr. Taylor, we've had a couple of folks asking about Medicaid spending. One lady who clearly knows her state government said that all this talk of transportation is nice, but Medicaid is 25% or more of the state budget, and she wants to know what can lawmakers in Austin do about reforming Medicaid spending.
Sure. Well, actually, I was at lunch today with the head of Baylor Hospital System, and he was asking about Medicaid spending. And at one point, he said, "The state only gives me 50 cents of every dollar I spend." And I said, "And you want more Medicaid spending?" And the table laughed. I mean, I just, some people are saying that a lot of the press in particular sort of picked up Medicaid expansion as kind of this great thing that will really help Texas, but the fact is that of the 4 states that tried Medicaid expansion starting in 2000, Arizona, Oregon, Delaware, and Maine, every state ended up spending far more money than they had ever projected. I mean, in Arizona, they thought they would spend $600 million. They ended up spending $2.4 billion, and that's on, they kind of projected out what they thought the expenditure would be 10 years later. And they thought there would be less uncompensated care, and they ended up that uncompensated care, for instance, in the state of Maine, increased 300% over a 10-year period. And they thought they'd have more insured people. And in every state, or none of the 4 states that employed Medicaid expansion reduced their uninsured population. They just ended up shifting people over from private care onto Medicaid. So Medicaid, unfortunately, is a relatively broken system, particularly because it does not have any co-pays. So people have there's no incentive for people not to use services. There's one study that was done in Oregon around their failed Medicaid expansion experiment where they found out that people who got Medicaid used 40% more dollars in the emergency room instead of less dollars in the emergency room. And this is kind of antithetical to what a lot of different people try to tell me is, hey, if you do Medicaid, we have more preventative care, and therefore there'll be less emergency care. And it actually doesn't work that way. When you have Medicaid, you have more emergency care and more preventative care. So you don't, and then ultimately they've actually looked at the healthcare outcomes. They don't really see any difference to speak of between population on Medicaid or not on Medicaid. So you end up just soaking the taxpayer, growing government, growing bureaucracy, and you know, we, the people who are paying for it, end up with less freedom in our daily lives. Texas has certainly led the way in terms of innovating within Medicaid. We were one of the early states adopting a managed Medicaid, which has greatly reduced the cost of Medicaid to the state of Texas, while increasing and improving outcomes. We need to continue to focus on managing lifestyles and trying to get people to lose weight, stop smoking, and to you know, eat right. All the strategies I've seen that cut spending are focused around those things. But broadly speaking, Medicaid expansion has a proven track record of failure. I've asked many advocates for Medicaid expansion, can you show me anywhere that it's ever worked? And they say no. I say, well, can you show me? And I say, well, I can show you where it's failed. Why would you go for something that you think might work versus something that you know doesn't work? So I have a pretty strong feeling about that, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. I'm very open-minded about it. I'm willing to listen to contrary evidence, but so far, Medicaid expansion has not worked for any state that heretofore has tried it.
Here, we're going to get to a call from Alice up in North Texas in just a moment. We've got two questions from folks who are listening online, who listening on their web portals. Zoe in New Braunfels asks, in reference to health care, you know, what can the state do about the gap between, you know, what Obamacare is doing and Medicaid's doing, without, though, you know, blowing up the state budget?
Well, you know, again, what we really need in Texas is we need to get control of our own Medicaid dollars, and if we and really put in you know, co-pays and really try to incentivize people to lower their consumption of health care. Once you you know, I sort of say, you know, what are you going to have more drinking, an open bar or a cash bar? And Medicaid is an open bar. There's no cost for any health care consumption, period, for the consumer. And then in turn, they use a lot more health care, and it's just far more expensive than what it could or should be. And so if Texas, and I've voted in the legislature several times and will continue to advocate for Texas getting control of its health care dollars through a block grant, that we then in turn could implement some very basic ideas like co-pays that the private sector has had for many decades. I mean, this has been some crazy wild-eyed idea that somebody got last night. I mean, this has been around for a long time. And really, you know, getting people to have skin in the game in terms of, you know, there is some cost associated with using a service, but if you make it completely free, there's you know, there's a lack of cost, there's a lack of responsibility toward being able to use it. So.
And folks, I would point you to some great work done by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. You can find their website, texaspolicy.com. They're a fantastic, free market-oriented conservative think tank based in Austin. Where they have studied this very question of looking at how can Texas better meet the needs of the poor and the indigent, you know, the truly poor, the truly indigent, without exploding our budget. If you visit texaspolicy.com, you can find some really great work that they've done with some very practical ways that, you know, following in Mr. Taylor's steps there about block grants and other reforms that can be done. Now, some of that we clearly have got to get the federal government to buy into. But some of it might just require the state just kind of puffing up its chest and saying, you know, leave us alone. Also, we've got one from one of your constituents, Mr. Taylor, here, a web question asking about toll roads and asking if part of your concern would center around that they unfairly inhibit the poor from freely moving about.
Well, I think Michael, appreciate that question, and certainly I'm not sure if this caller heard that. I know with these telephone town hall meetings, people come and go. But for those that missed this in the earlier part of the call, I joined forces with several other legislators from Collin County, opposing an effort to increase the number of toll roads in our county. And there are some toll roads that have access lanes that don't have access lanes. There has certainly been an effort to make sure that that toll roads that are installed do have they do have free access lanes along either side, so that people that do not want to pay the toll can drive along them. But and certainly for my area, I'm totally opposed to any effort to toll anything else. Just no, stop. We're very tolled in Collin County, and I think but we as a state need to do a better job of funding transportation. And I was very happy to work on what will be Proposition 1. All of you will have a chance to vote on that in November, and that was crafted from a conservative perspective of trying to protect the rainy day fund and try to make sure that there was enough funding in it at the same time that we put dollars toward transportation and made sure that we perform one of the very core functions of government. I mean, Adam Smith in his book The Wealth of Nations in 1776 writes down that transportation is a core function of government, and I believe that. I think that's true. True then, it's true today. And we as a state need to do a good job. And we have generally kept even the number of minutes per capita in Texas that Texans are spending in traffic has actually stayed relatively even. Other states have had horrible experiences, and many more minutes per capita are spent in traffic, even though they're spending a lot more in terms of gas tax dollars. I'm repeating myself, but that's for the people that may have not heard the earlier part of the call.
Let's go to North Texas and visit with Alice, who I think has two questions for us. Alice, thank you so much for being with us tonight. What's your question?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. As a Texas mom who has children in public schools and private schools, and there's two big issues facing our children today in Texas. One is the APUSH, the new AP U.S. History Framework that has been put out there, and I want to know if you're aware that last week on Wednesday, the State Board of Education passed an amendment that said that any AP or IB courses had to align with the Texas TEKS. And then on Friday, a resolution was passed by the State Board of Education rejecting the new AP U.S. History Framework because it did not align clearly with the Texas TEKS. And the College Board, who owns the AP curriculum, has said that they will make changes, which that we see if that actually happens. My question is, would you be willing to look at passing legislation that public dollars are not spent to pay for any new AP courses or exams that are not aligned to the Texas TEKS, and public dollars not be used for teacher training or professional development for curriculum products that are not aligned with our Texas TEKS? And that leads into my second question.
You
want to go with that one?
Yeah, why don't we let him? And I'll come back to you. Also, won't let you go. Ms. Shelley,
okay.
We've had a lot of push, whether it's C-scope, whether this kind of rewriting of history going on. I mean, as a guy who, most people do normal things and watch television at night. I like reading old history books and biographies of Winston Churchill and things. And it's really a little scary to me to think that we're kind of rewriting history in our schools. What can the legislature do about that?
Well, and let me just say that Michael recently borrowed a title from me of Warlord, the story of Winston Churchill from his perspective as a warrior. And anyway, Michael, I'm up to the Second World War at this point, so I'm not sure where you are in that one, but it's about 800 pages. I'm about 600 pages into it. So anyway, there's no question that we need to make sure that our children are learning history as it happened and not get a partisan view of it. The State Board of Education has an important function in this, as do local school boards. I was one. I took a role in stopping C-scope last session. and we will see what needs to be done. I mean, but it is exciting to see, quote unquote, the system work when State Board of Education says, look, we don't think this is up to standard, and then you watch the College Board say, look, we're gonna rewrite this for you. So we'll see where we are. I think Alice, you've brought up some good ideas about how the legislature could act, and I just not every action out there requires an immediate on draft a bill to do this, that, or the other. I think in this one we've got to pay a little bit of wait and see. The legislature doesn't meet for 100 plus days, so we'll see what transpires. But I certainly agree with the premise of your question, which is that children should learn history as it happened and not allowed to be biased.
And Alice, you had a second question?
I did. Because I have children in high school, and it's hard enough with all of this Common Core philosophy of education coming in the back door and trying to get our kids through the system and into college. And when we look at some of the ethics and the scandals that are going on, I would love to know your take, and if you're willing to stand up against the impeachment of the Texas Board of Regents whistleblower Wallace Hall, who was looking into corruption, and now our legislature is looking at impeaching him.
Sure. No, I appreciate that question. I'm in an interesting position because, and I've actually, you're the first person, Alice, to ask me, in a public forum about this. Everything that I have read, all the interviews that I've seen about this topic, I don't understand how Wallace Hall could have done anything wrong. At the same time, I need to keep an open mind, and I really would be remiss if I committed one way or the other, because ultimately, if he were to be impeached, that would be those charges would be referred to the full Texas House, and then I would be in a position to vote on it. And it's awkward for a jury member to say before the case, I'm going to go this way or that way. But everything that I have seen thus far tells me that he was asking legitimate questions. He seems like exactly the kind of regent that I would want to have looking after my university system. And I'm quite frankly embarrassed from everything that I've seen, and I'm not giving a final judgment here, but I'm embarrassed that members of the legislature tried to impeach him and are really even pursuing this, because very clearly to me he found some pretty serious corruption that really needs serious and stern investigation. And Alice, let me just offer up. I have a 100% meeting policy. I've always had a 100% meeting policy. You guys can track me down. You can email me. My personal email is van@vantaylor.com, and I'd be happy to email that on to my staff and have them set up a meeting. I believe in working for the people, and if you want to sit down and talk about these topics or any others, or anybody else on this call wants to, just email me van@vantaylor.com, and I'll be happy to set up a meeting. And I know Michael's actually done quite a bit of work on this. Michael, do you want to comment on Wallace?
Yeah, look, as a guy who's not going to be possibly on a impeachment jury, I can tell you it's absolutely a snow job, railroad job going on by a small number of entrenched interests in Austin who have done played some very fun games with what they think is their personal property at the University of Texas. Like that's a state school. Merit is supposed to drive the day. Wallace Hall started off as a regent asking questions about fiscal mismanagement. People thought he was crazy. Sure enough, he was absolutely right. The books were being double counted and other things. That moved into questions about a payola scandal that resulted in the dean of the UT Law School having to resign his position in disgrace. And then lastly, he's uncovered a fair bit of what appears to be legislative clout abuse with otherwise underqualified students, kids who wouldn't have gotten into various UT programs, absent apparently some pushes from legislators. That is what has earned Wallace Hall this impeachment investigation for the last year. They've been going after him. I think that House Speaker Joe Straus really thought that that would just bully Wallace Hall into silence. Instead, they have found that they've got a regent who seems to be pretty intent on doing his job as an overseer, as the citizen's watchdog over a government agency. And rather than impeach him, I think that the legislature should be naming buildings after him and using him as a role model for other appointed officials on our state. We need more folks like Wallace Hall, not fewer. And in fact, if you visit EmpowerTexans.com, there is a new story up today about this whole issue involving the problems at the University of Texas. You can find that again at EmpowerTexans.com. Let's go out to West Texas, to Odessa, and visit with Jason. Actually, I'll go ahead and say his full name, Jason Moore, who is known affectionately around West Texas as Captain Watchdog for his influential radio program. Jason Moore, thanks for being on with an amateur this evening. What issue facing the legislature are you focused on?
Well, there's about 1,000, but I'll just stick with one tonight, and that is the Texas windstorm insurance. It's kind of a political question and an insurance question at the same time. I'm really concerned that the Texas windstorm insurance has been bled dry by trial lawyers over the last 7, 8, 10 years, who then turn around and use that money to fund, the Democrat Party, essentially, almost single-handedly. First and foremost, I'm concerned about what it's doing to insurance rates to people who are insured, and then secondly, to using public funds, for these political purposes. What can be done to finally put an end to the absolute lawsuit abuse of a hurricane that happened, 8, 10 years ago?
Well, Jason, lucky for you, I sit on the insurance committee in the Texas House, and so I can probably answer a little bit more about this. But just to quickly recap what he's talking about. There was a hurricane. The Texas windstorm insurance. Actually, there was a hurricane. A bunch of insurers. 4 hurricanes left the state. An entity called TWIA was formed by the state of Texas. It charges less than what it should charge. What is called an actuarially unsound rate. So they should be charging you $100 for insurance, and they charge you 50 cents. Everybody signed up for it. It drove whatever few remaining private insurers were out of business in the state because the state was competing. And then when the first hurricane hit, they horribly mismanaged the payment process. We have very strict prompt payment laws in Texas, and in turn, a bunch of trial lawyers made hundreds of millions of dollars at TWIA's expense. When the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association screwed up. The good news. Let me give you 2 pieces of good news. Good news is we have reformed some of the areas where there were where the trial lawyers were taking advantage of TWIA. And the second piece of good news is that TWIA is raising their rates. They've been raising their rates about 5% every year. We're now up to 80% of actuarially sound rates. And the reason this matters to every single Texan who pays homeowner insurance in the state is that if TWIA is short of money, if it does not have enough money from the premiums it collects to pay out, it gets to then turn around and pull money out of the pockets of the insurance companies that are insuring elsewhere in the state. So whether or not you own property on the coast, you're insuring property on the coast if you own property anywhere else in the state. And so I'm very keen on seeing, the Texas Windstorm Insurance Association continuing to increase their prices and really price themselves out of the market. They're actually watching. There are approximately about 50,000 policies that were actuarially soundly written, and so now we've got private insurers trying to take those. And so I think if TWIA continues to raise its prices, they will eventually raise them out right out of the market. And it's something that you can see in a 5 to 8 year time horizon that they will be hopefully largely out of the business, and you'll watch the private insurers come back in. But Jason, who's a great Texan and someone I'm proud to say I've met and know, is asking about something that's a very serious problem. I am actually working on my own set of legislation for next session to try to reduce the trial lawyers are abusing the homeowner policies for all Texans, and they are creating a multi-$100 million problem, which is raising homeowner insurance rates for all Texans. And I'm working to try to figure out how to fix that, and I'm been working closely with Texans for Lawsuit Reform, the Civil Justice League, to name a few, to try to reduce reduce this very serious problem, which has expanded beyond TWIA and is now really into all kinds of homeowner policies across the state.
Well, let's try to head out to Amarillo and visit with Tom. Tom, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Wait a second. I think we hit the wrong button there. Yeah, there we go. All right, Tom, thank you so much for your patience this evening. Tom, what's your question for Senator-elect Van Taylor?
I was wondering what the realistic chance Scott Turner has of becoming the Speaker of the House in the next session.
Well, I saw Representative Turner only yesterday. I think that I worked hard to try to get Ken Paxton elected Speaker of the House in 2011, and we were only a few votes short in the Republican caucus meeting. I think that I've heard a lot of members say that they're looking forward to supporting him. I'm moving on to the state Senate, so this is unfortunately not going to be my fight, because it was certainly one that I relished when I spent my time in the House. But I think it is realistic. I think that I know a lot of members of the legislature, and particularly of the House, are looking for a new speaker. Certainly, many would like to keep him, but he's working very hard. He's talking to a lot of members, and he's a great member of the Texas House, and I'm very, very proud to have him as a colleague.
We have a question from James in Austin, Texas, saying that he's reading that a federal judge in Corpus Christi looks poised to strike down the state's voter ID law, and James is wanting to know if Ken Paxton will have adequate resources to appeal that decision and protect the integrity of our elections.
Well, James, the answer to that question is yes. The legislature, and I was one of the ones that voted for it, voted for a voter ID law that was actually patterned after a law in another state that had already been blessed by the DOJ, and so it's honestly very surprising to me that they've complained about it, because we have the way we have structured it. But we'll make sure that Senator Paxton, who hopefully will be the next Attorney General for Texas, will have all the resources he needs to go and fight for that. And again, I have to admit, I'm somewhat dismayed. We structured that law to look like another law that was already blessed off, and so to have the DOJ turn around and say, well, this version's okay, but that version's not, is honestly pretty upsetting. But sometimes you watch the other side play politics.
Folks, I remind you on a live call, we've only got a couple minutes left here with our time together tonight. I want to remind you can visit EmpowerTexans.com, click the little subscribe button, and get on our newsletter list. Real excited to have so many folks participating in the call this evening. I also encourage you to visit VanTaylor.com. That's the website of Senator-elect Van Taylor, who's been very gracious to spend some time with us tonight. We're going to be doing a lot more calls like this, hopefully with Mr. Taylor, and certainly with other of his colleagues, both leading up to and during the legislative session. The best way to find out about these and to ensure that you get to take part is, again, to subscribe to our newsletter by visiting empowertexans.com. The newsletter is free. All you have to do is just click subscribe on there. So excited to have all of you participating on the call. Ms. Taylor, are there any particular projects or initiatives that we haven't talked about this evening? Before we go to the last question or two here, are there any projects or initiatives that you're looking forward to come January to kind of sink your teeth into as a new member of the state Senate?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on insurance tort reform, working on intellectual property tort reform, working on several different things to keep taxes fair, to keep them low, working on keeping spending lower. Got a couple of different ideas on that. Working on protecting children from online sex predators, trying to reduce human trafficking. I look forward to having a very, very busy, very full session, but the most important thing that I can do is meet with my constituents at home, leading up to, in January when I'm really going to be heading down to Austin quite a bit and harder to get a hold of. So if you want to email me at van@vantaylor.com, I'd be happy to line up a meeting. And like I said, I have a 100% meeting policy. I work for the people, and you guys are the reason that I have the tremendous honor of serving you and working for you down in Austin. And you may not be able to vote for me, but I certainly can vote for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we kind of get towards the end of our time here, we want to try to squeeze one or two more calls in, so the folks that that we're able to poll on, I want to get as quickly as you can to your questions so that we can make sure we get as many folks on. We've got a lot of people holding with questions here. Let's right now go to Mesquite, Texas, and visit with Matthew. Matthew, thank you so much for hanging on during the call this evening. What's your question for Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Taylor, my main question is what do you think about a move to use the state convention to amend the Constitution of the United States of America for like a balanced budget amendment, for adding term limits to legislators in the Congress and the Senate, and eventually hopefully getting term limits for Supreme Court justices who have become extremely political. And that's the whole reason they were put in for life, is so they wouldn't become political. And there's a big move to try and do that, and I just want to know if you would be interested in doing that if you become Speaker of the Senate or of the House in Texas.
Sure. Well, Matthew, I appreciate you asking that. And I've had a lot of really good conservative friends ask questions about a convention of states, and that is there is a provision in the U.S. Constitution that allows the states to call for a convention of a convention of states that then in turn could amend the U.S. Constitution. And I've read Mark Levin's book. Mark Levin is a radio talk show host who's really pushed for this. I've met with numerous people. The statewide leader for this, district leaders, and just, Matthew, people like yourself who just want to know. The interesting thing to me is there are many different ideas. There are almost as many ideas as there are people I've met with about what the convention should do and what the amendments should be. And I think that amending the U.S. Constitution is an enormously serious undertaking. And I would really need to see strong consensus about what it would be. And I want to be responsive. I want to listen to the people, and what I hear is just different ideas. And I've had people say, well, I like every amendment that Levin has, but I want to tweak the following two amendments these ways. You've offered some slightly different ideas tonight. The ones that I honestly had not heard prior to. And actually, just quickly on term limits, the average tenure in the state Senate next year will be 4.5 years. So Texas has, with its system of government, and I think the average tenure in the state House will be about 6 years. We have a pretty rapid cyclic rate. We chew through legislators relatively quickly as a state. I don't think it's really dominated by it's not like the U.S. House where they're just people just stay there for 40 years and it's it's all they do. And there are a few people that stay for several decades, but they're very, very few. Michael, do you want to add on to that, or you just want to get?
Yeah, I think the thing that has impressed me about the Article 5 Convention of the Convention of States idea is that it's something that hasn't been done before, and that I think that there's certainly the sense to which there's a lot of interest, I think, around the country in finding a new way to go after the problem of an out-of-control federal government. The most important check that you have on there, because of course this Convention of States could not amend the Constitution. They would only recommend to the states amendments, just like if Congress were to do it. Those amendments to stop a bad amendment requires only one chamber in 13 states to say no to a bad amendment, and that kills a constitutional amendment. Only 13. One chamber in 13 states is all it takes to kill a bad amendment, or kill a good amendment for that matter, which is why the Constitution hasn't been amended that much in its 230-some-year history. So I think there's a lot of interest in that, and certainly the devil's always in the details. But this is where we need to make sure that we're having these conversations now with Mr. Taylor, with his colleagues, because when they get into the legislative session, they are drinking from a fire hose and surfing on a tidal wave, and that it's going to be important that you have these conversations now rather than all of us showing up in April saying, hey, what about this and what about that? Because these are the kind of things that our lawmakers need to be hearing about and reading about and discussing today. So I encourage you to make sure that whether Van Taylor is your state senator or not, no matter who your state senator is, whoever your state representative is, call them up tomorrow. Visit with them. If you don't know who your state rep and state senator is, visit EmpowerTexans.com, and you can click on the little Who Represents Me tab at the top of the screen, and we will help put you in contact with your state rep and your state senator. As citizens, it's our obligation to be involved with and engaged with our employees, with Mr. Taylor and his colleagues, to make sure that they know where we stand on the issues facing the Lone Star State. Van Taylor, you've been very generous with your time this evening. Really appreciate your service, not only the Texas legislature, but of course your service to our nation as a Marine. Certainly your lovely wife and your daughters deserve our gratitude for being willing to share you with us here when I know there are lots of things your little girls would rather you be doing than chatting on the phone with all of us tonight. But really appreciate your time and your service to the Lone Star State.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate your service to keeping guys like me, keeping us on an even keel, and Empower Texans is certainly an organization I look to for good ideas and sound thinking on keeping government in check. And it's a privilege and an honor to serve you. And again, if you want to sit down and talk, I have a open meeting policy. I have a 100% meeting policy, and I always have. And I really want to sit down and talk to anybody that's got an issue they want to discuss. I thank you, everybody who stayed on this long. I really appreciate you taking the time to hear what we have to say and caring about our great state.
And folks, you can learn more about Van Taylor by visiting his website, vantaylor.com. And of course, love to have you visit EmpowerTexans.com. Click that subscribe button and sign up for our newsletter. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I look forward to visiting with you again very soon on the next one of our calls. Until then, may God bless you, and through you, may God continue to bless the great state of Texas. Good night, everyone.